tonight, just a couple of hours ago, federal prosecutors in this case have now written to the judge that's overseeing the Lev Parnas case to say that they, the prosecutors, no longer believe it is safe to allow Lev Parnas to be out on house arrest with an ankle monitor while he's awaiting trial on these felony charges. As of tonight, prosecutors now say that he is a, quote, significant flight risk, and he should be remanded to custody immediately. They say, quote, it is difficult to overstate the extreme flight risk that Mr. Parnas now poses. Why did they change their mind on whether he needed to be in jail or not? Before, they were fine with house arrest and an ankle monitor. Why now do they say, oh, no, you got to put this guy in jail? According to this filing from prosecutors tonight, they say they have just realized that Mr. Parnas lied to them about his financial situation and his assets after he was arrested. When they were going through the process of setting his appropriate bail terms, he lied to them about something big. What specifically? Well, according to prosecutors, he neglected to mention to them, among other things, that in September of this year, so right in the middle of him working on this scheme with Rudy Giuliani at the direction of President Trump to pressure Ukraine into giving President Trump political favors and pressuring Ukraine into supporting this weird Russian disinformation thing that Russia didn't interfere in the 2016 election. It was Ukraine instead. In the middle of Lev Parnas running that scheme in Ukraine with Rudy Giuliani at the president's direction, in September of this year, September 2019, he neglected to mention to prosecutors that, quote, he received $1 million wired to him from a bank account in Russia. Oh. Prosecutors say he also neglected to mention hundreds of thousands of dollars he received as a kind of pass-through from a Kremlin-connected oligarch who has hired Trump-connected lawyers, who then hired Lev to work for them. That Kremlin-connected oligarch, who prosecutors say is an upper echelon associate of Russian organized crime, is one of the people in Ukraine who's been providing Giuliani with fodder for the impeachment scheme. Lev didn't mention the hundreds of thousands of dollars he'd got through that guy, and he didn't mention that someone in Russia wired him $1 million last month, while he was working for Rudy Giuliani in Giuliani's capacity as President Trump's personal lawyer. I mean... So Lev's working for the president and somebody in Russia is sending him $1 million? Really? The impeachment proceedings are underway literally as we speak in the Judiciary Committee. They are marking up and debating these articles of impeachment right now. There is no factual disagreement as to the specific things for which the president is going to be impeached. But the overall story of what exactly he was up to here, including this new question tonight of why somebody in Russia wired $1 million to one of the guys who was carrying out this scheme for him in the middle of the scheme, I mean, that's all still rolling out, literally tonight. I mean, it's rolling out in the ongoing investigation by the Intelligence Committee. It's rolling out in the federal courts as various oversight groups start to pry loose these records of the president's behavior that they have tried to hide inside the Trump White House. And tonight, it is rolling out in the Southern District of New York, where federal prosecutors tonight are asking a judge to lock up one of the key players who carried out these orders from the president. Man, we are just getting started, apparently.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.